Hi, I'm Robin, and this final video is talking about the joints of the upper body. Now, it's kind of hard to see here, so I'm going to zoom in just a little bit, but I have, on the posterior view over here, I have color-coded each of my bones, and on the anterior view of this side, I have color-coded the articulations, the joints, so that they match the bones on the posterior side. So the first joint that we're going to talk about right here, as you can see, it is in pink because it is the articulation of the humerus with the scapula in the glenoid cavity. This articulation creates the glenohumeral joint. Moving downward, as you can see, the radius is orange and the ulna is purple. So over here, it's very small to see, but you can see the articulation right here between the ulna and the humerus. This articulation creates the humeral ulnar joint. Over here, you can see the articulation between the humerus and the radius, which creates the humeroradial joint. And then, as you can see right here, it's very small, but the orange and the purple articulation creates the proximal radio-ulnar joint of the elbow. And now, moving downward, right here, this purple and orange articulation, it matches the radius and ulna of the other side, but this articulation right here creates the distal radial ulnar joint. Here we have, as you can see, over here you have the radius, which is in orange, and the carpals, which are in blue. So over here, you can see the articulation between the orange and the blue. This articulation is called the radiocarpal joint, and it's the joint right between the radius and the carpals that allow for movement like this. This movement is called flexion. Now, in between, you can see very slightly there is some blue in between each carpal. The carpal to carpal interaction or articulation is called the intercarpal joint. Next, we have, you can see the yellow over here articulates with the yellow of the metacarpals over here. You see the blue carpal articulating with the yellow metacarpal. This articulation forms the carpo-metacarpal joint. There is a carpal-metacarpal joint for each of the metacarpals. You have a carpo-metacarpal articulation for the first metacarpal, a carpo-metacarpal articulation for the second, for the third, for the fourth, and for the fifth metacarpals. Next, you see that we have a yellow articulation of the metacarpal with a green articulation of the phalange. This articulation between the metacarpal and the phalange, the proximal phalange, is called the metaphalangeal joint. So you can think about it right here at your first knuckle right here where you bend. This is the metaphalangeal joint. The metacarpal is meeting or articulating with the proximal phalange or the proximal phalanx. Next, there are two more little green spaces right here. These articulations are just between the phalanxes themselves. And because they are articulations in between the phalanxes themselves, they are called interphalangeal articulations or interphalangeal joints. As you can see right here, this joint, this knuckle right here, is the articulation between the proximal phalanx and the middle phalanx, creating the proximal interphalangeal joint. And then right here, this tiny little knuckle right here, the last knuckle, this is the articulation between the middle phalanx and the distal phalanx, creating the distal interphalangeal joint.